Black CEO humiliated at her own hotel. What she did next shocked everyone. She owned the keys, the title, and the dream. But on one ordinary afternoon, none of that mattered. A black CEO walked into her own luxury hotel and was treated like an intruder. The staff didn't ask questions, they didn't check facts, they just saw someone who didn't belong. In minutes, pride turned to humiliation, and what happened next shocked everyone inside those walls. How could a woman with so much power be made to feel invisible in her own empire? And what she did next, no one saw coming. The lobby gleamed with polished marble floors and gold-trimmed chandeliers, but the welcome she received was anything but warm. As she stepped through the doors of her own hotel, she expected polite nods, maybe even recognition. Instead, she was met with suspicious stares. The front desk clerk's smile faltered, then disappeared entirely. "Excuse me, ma'am, guests are not allowed beyond the lobby without registration," he said flatly. She gave her name. He didn't even look up. "I owned this hotel," she said, expecting the misunderstanding to dissolve in an instant. But it didn't. His expression hardened, and within moments a manager appeared, followed by security. Each step they took closer felt like a judgment. Their voices carried sharp edges. "You need to leave," they insisted. No one checked the records. No one verified her claim. It was easier to assume she didn't belong. She felt the eyes of other guests on her, whispers cutting through the air like knives. Her chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to fight back, to shout who she was. But she held her composure. That's when one guard reached for her arm, guiding her toward the door as though she were trespassing in her own empire. She could feel anger rising, hot and electric. Not just for herself, but for what this moment represented. Years of hard work, late nights and sacrifices reduced to nothing because of the color of her skin. Outside, the sun blazed down, but the heat in her veins burned hotter. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Board members, staff, people she trusted. Should she call them now? Should she unleash her authority and end this humiliation instantly? No, not yet. She turned, looking back at the glass doors as they closed in her face. Guests inside craned their necks, curious but silent. No one asked questions, no one spoke up. The injustice cut deeper because it was casual, routine, like they'd done this 100 times before. She walked away slowly, but not in defeat. With every step, her resolve hardened. If they thought she would leave quietly, they were wrong. She had power, and she was about to remind them of it. By the time she reached her car, her mind was already working. Calls to make, messages to send, plans to set in motion. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. And inside that hotel, the staff had no idea the storm they had just unleashed. She took a deep breath and stepped back through the glass doors, her presence commanding attention immediately. The lobby, once buzzing with quiet whispers and polite smiles, froze. Every eye turned toward her, some in confusion, others in sudden recognition. The staff who had questioned her authority moments ago realized too late that they had underestimated her. The manager tried to speak, but his words faltered under the weight of her gaze. The guards who had escorted her out shifted uncomfortably. There was no yelling, no dramatic confrontation, just the calm, unwavering authority of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she deserved. She walked slowly, each step deliberate toward the front desk. The air felt thick with tension. The hum of polite murmurs was replaced by a charged silence. Every staff member could feel it. The reckoning had arrived. No one dared make a move. No one dared speak without thinking. With a quiet but firm tone, she reminded them of her position, of her ownership, of the respect that was due. Every action, every word carried the weight of consequence. She made it clear that discrimination, assumptions, and disrespect would not be tolerated, not in her hotel, not under her watch. And then she paused, letting the silence stretch, each second magnifying the gravity of the moment.
It was a test of courage, a reflection of their conscience, and an undeniable lesson in accountability. The humiliation they had inflicted moments ago had reversed, replaced by awe, respect, and a keen awareness of the injustice they had just participated in. And as she moved toward her office, the staff exchanged nervous glances. They knew this was more than a personal victory. It was a turning point, a demonstration that authority and dignity could not be ignored. And in that charged, silent lobby, a single question lingered. Would they ever see someone else's worth without prejudice, or would this moment be a fleeting reminder of the lesson they had barely learned?
She didn't storm back in immediately. She paused, letting the anger settle, turning it into strategy. Within minutes, her phone was alive with calls to trusted staff, legal advisors, and board members. Every message, every command she sent carried authority, the kind that reminded everyone she wasn't just a title on paper. By the time she returned, the atmosphere inside the hotel had shifted. Whispers turned to uneasy silence. The staff who had doubted her authority felt the weight of their mistake. She walked through the lobby with calm, controlled power, each step a statement. This was her space, her empire, and she would not be ignored. What happened next was decisive. Policies were reviewed, accountability was demanded. The staff responsible for the humiliation were confronted, and actions were taken that left no doubt. Disrespect and discrimination would not be tolerated. The hotel, once a stage for injustice, became a place where authority and respect were reclaimed. But the story didn't end with her personal victory. It rippled outward, sparking conversations among staff, guests, and industry insiders about bias and assumptions that silently shape behavior. The incident became more than a personal affront. It was a mirror reflecting systemic issues that many ignore until they see them firsthand. She knew that one story couldn't change the world overnight. Yet, by standing her ground, by reclaiming what was hers with dignity and force, she sent a message. Injustice can be challenged, and the voice of one person can inspire reflection in many. In the end, she returned not just as a CEO, but as a symbol of resilience and accountability. The question lingers long after the story fades from view. How often do we underestimate someone based on appearance? And what happens when we finally recognize the truth? Her experience reminds us that power is not just about position. It's about presence, courage, and the unwillingness to accept injustice silently. And maybe, just maybe, it's a call for all of us to examine the assumptions we make every day. Even after she reclaimed her authority, the echoes of that humiliation lingered. She couldn't help but replay every moment in her mind. The doubt in the manager's eyes, the coldness of the staff who had ignored her title, the whispers from guests who seemed to see her not as a CEO, but as someone who didn't belong. The anger she felt was not just personal. It was a reflection of the countless microaggressions, assumptions, and barriers she had faced throughout her career. Every moment of disrespect she had endured surged back, sharp and vivid, reminding her that this incident was not isolated, it was systemic. Yet, even in the face of anger, she held herself with control. She knew that reactions rooted purely in emotion rarely create change. Instead, she turned every ounce of that fire into decisive action. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just board members. It was employees who had witnessed her removal, some apologetic, some shocked, some scared. They needed guidance, they needed clarity, and most importantly, they needed to understand that the culture in this hotel would no longer tolerate discrimination, no matter how subtle. As she walked through the corridors of her hotel, she noticed the tension thick in the air. Staff avoided her gaze, guests watched in silent curiosity, and the hum of activity slowed. She paused near the concierge desk, her eyes meeting them, not with fury, but with a piercing, unwavering determination that demanded respect. She issued new directives, emphasizing accountability, training, and awareness. Every word, every gesture reinforced a simple truth.
Authority cannot be questioned by prejudice, and dignity cannot be stripped away without consequence. The lessons extended beyond the walls of the hotel. Social media buzzed with stories from employees and guests who had witnessed the confrontation. Conversations sparked about racial bias, unconscious assumptions, and the weight of first impressions. People began to question their own behaviors and the invisible rules they enforced in their workplaces and communities. What had started as a personal affront became a catalyst for reflection and dialogue far beyond the hotel lobby. She returned to her office, letting the moment settle, and for the first time that day, she allowed herself a deep breath. This wasn't just a victory for her. It was a statement for anyone who had ever been dismissed or doubted because of their race or appearance. And while the path ahead remained long and the battles far from over, one truth was undeniable. Change begins when courage meets action, and when one person refuses to accept injustice silently. And as she looked out over the city skyline from her office, she silently asked the world, "How many times have we judged someone too quickly? And how long will it take before we truly see each other?"